Hi, it's Jacqueline from Project Most. Today I'd like to do a new experiment that is kinetic sand, which is really interesting since it's like playing with sand, except it's a little bit more textured. Sometimes you see it in the store, and it sticks together sort of like modeling clay, but it also falls apart easily. So instead of getting it from the store, we're going to make some for ourselves. You don't need a lot of ingredients. You need clean sand. I actually got this from the beach, but you can also use playground sand or some sort of craft sand. It can also be colored. I just went with natural because that's what was near me. If this had lots of chunks in it, like pieces of sticks or shells, I would sift through it. But I scooped it from an area that was pretty empty of other pieces of things rather than sand. You also need cornstarch, any brand. You need dish soap, any type, and you need school glue. I have a huge jug of school glue, but you only need a small amount. You need half of a cup. So your ingredients are 1 cup of sand, half of a cup of glue, 2 teaspoons of dish soap, and 2 tablespoons of cornstarch, and that's it. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to measure everything out and put it into this bowl to mix, except the glue goes last. Some other things that I have that will help me are popsicle sticks for helping me to get the glue out and also to stir. A tablespoon, this was for the cornstarch, I need 2 tablespoons of cornstarch. A teaspoon, this is for the dish soap, I need 2 teaspoons of dish soap. And my measuring cups. Now I'm using the measuring cups that we play with outside in the dirt because I don't want to scratch up my good kitchen measuring cups, but you can use whatever you'd like. So I have the half of a cup of measuring cup for the glue, and I have the 1 cup measuring cup for the sand. I also have a bowl of warm water because I'm not going to rush to the sink while I'm making the sand to wash the glue out of my measuring cup, but I don't want to let it dry. So when I'm done measuring the glue, I'm going to put it in the warm water so it stays soft and it's easy to clean later on. So here's what we do. We will measure out 1 cup of sand. And that's far more than a cup, so I'm going to level it off and then dump the extra back into my container. I also have a placemat. It keeps my work surface clean, even though I'm outside, but it also will allow me to mush the kinetic sand once I'm mixed everything. So 1 cup of sand goes in, and then half a cup of glue. Oh, wait a minute. The glue goes last. I'm going to set this aside. I was very excited to pour the glue. All right. Next comes 2 tablespoons of the cornstarch. So basically we're mixing 2 of our dry ingredients and the dish soap. Then comes the glue. So 2 tablespoons of that. A lot of times cornstarch is really powdery. It makes things not stick, so I suspect that's what this would be for, so it doesn't stick to your hands. We need 2 teaspoons of dish soap. 1, 2. I bet if you had scented dish soap, this sand would smell really good. And I'm going to use my popsicle stick to scrape out that dish soap so I don't have any left over in there. All right. Now, I mix all this together first, thoroughly. So it's mixing the sand with the cornstarch. It's pretty easy to mix together. It looks like the dish soap's getting a little bit clumpy, but that's okay. You can see pretty well mixed. Now I'll be kneading this with my hands after I add the glue. So I imagine anything that's not mixed in will get mixed in better later. All right, now comes the glue. So we need to add this a little bit at a time, and then we need to stir it thoroughly between. So I'm adding a little bit, and it's really sticky. I'm adding a little bit more, and my bowl is starting to spin on my placemat, so I'm going to hold it with my hand so that it doesn't go spinning off the step here. And I'm just letting the glue drizzle out a little bit as I mixing. This is really interesting looking. It's pretty liquidy. Now this is a non-Newtonian liquid, or non-Newtonian matter, meaning it's not a liquid and it's not a solid. It feels like both a liquid and a solid at the same time, but it looks almost like a cookie dough or something. Well, I'll add the rest of my glue. Put that in my warm water and stir thoroughly. I'm scraping all the way down to the bottom to make sure that there's no dry sand in the bottom that I've missed. Now I have to say, this looks pretty liquidy. So I am going to pour it out onto my mat, but first, you know what? I feel like, yeah, it's a little liquidy for my taste at least. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a little bit more sand. Even though the recipe said a cup of sand to half a cup of glue, I feel like it's just going to ooze all over the place. And I want it to be a little bit more like sand in a sandbox. So I'm just adding a little bit more. Let's see what that's like. And I think it's okay. If you want to adjust your recipe, I think you could do that too, based on how it turns out. Sometimes science is like that. Sometimes you follow the instructions, but it doesn't come out exactly the way you want it, so you can experiment. So I'm experimenting. So I'm adding, I think I added probably a half a cup of sand, a third to a half a cup of sand, and I'm also going to add a little bit more cornstarch. Who knows what's going to happen since I'm adding this after the glue, but we'll find out. So a little bit more of that. I'll stir it up, and it looks like it's almost ready for me to put it on the placemat. Alright, so if you can see, this is a lot less drippy, if you want to use that word. It's more solid. And when I'm done playing with this, I can put this back in a like a plastic bag or some sort of container that will keep it from the moisture from evaporating, so that I will be able to play with this another time. This is still really drippy. So this would be fun to play with outside. I'm not sure I would play with this in my living room, but I would also consider adding more sand to see if I can make it. What I would like is for it to be dry enough to be able to drive trucks and stuff through it, or maybe make little sculptures like sand castles like I would at the beach, except without the water in the beach. So your recipe for kinetic sand is 1 cup of sand, half a cup of glue, 2 teaspoons of dish soap, and 2 tablespoons of cornstarch. But as you saw, I didn't like the consistency that it came out to be, so I changed it a little bit. Now I find it's a much more interesting consistency for me to play with. So make your kinetic sand, the non-Newtonian substance, and if you adjust the recipe, I'm really curious. So put it in the comment section of our Facebook page and have fun. Here's my kinetic sand recap. So I just finished cleaning my hands and it washed off pretty easily because the soap made it slide right off. So I just used water and it rinsed off. All of my dishes cleaned up nicely too. I think it would be a really fun outside activity when it's a little bit warmer and you don't mind getting wet. And if you have an inside space that can get messy, like if you have a nice wide table or some sort of craft area, it's fun to play with. It was a little bit gooier and stickier than I anticipated, but as you saw, there are only 4 ingredients and you can play with the ratios. So you can experiment, as I did, with a little bit more or less of certain ingredients and see if you can get the consistency that you like. It's a little bit more oozy than the Kinetic Sand that I played with from the store, but it's definitely interesting stuff. I'm going to put mine in a container and then take it out on a warm day and play with it outside. And maybe if it dries a little bit, maybe it will be more moldable and less slime-like.